Far from the sea, in the green hills of Shaanxi, rises an artificial mountain. Beneath it lies the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. Around the mound spreads a city of the dead, chariots, stables, musicians, officials, and the famous terracotta army, thousands of clay soldiers standing in silent ranks, each face unique. Ancient chronicles describe the emperor's burial chamber as a map of his empire. A ceiling set with pearls to form the night sky, rivers and seas flowing with liquid mercury, palaces filled with treasure, crossbows rigged to fire on intruders. A kingdom rebuilt underground to last forever. When archaeologists uncovered the terracotta army in 1974, they expected to find the central tomb soon after. Decades have passed. It remains untouched. Modern surveys confirm mercury in the soil, echoing the old texts. Ground-penetrating radar shows walls and voids beneath the mound, yet no one dares to dig. The reasons are practical and cultural. When the first soldiers were exposed to air, the bright pigments on their armor flaked away within minutes. Silk, wood, and paper would vanish even faster. Opening the tomb with today's technology could destroy what it holds before it can be studied. There is also reverence. In China, imperial tombs are sacred. To disturb them invites not only physical risk but cultural outrage. The resting place of the first emperor carries weight beyond archaeology. It represents power, unity, and the ancestors themselves. So the mound remains sealed. Instruments map its secrets from above, while millions visit the warriors who guard its perimeter. Beneath their feet, the emperor waits in darkness as he has for 2,000 years. In a palace built to last until the end of history. The mystery of Queen Nefertiti. Over 3 millennia ago, Queen Nefertiti stood at the heart of a transformative period in ancient Egypt. As the wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten during the 18th dynasty, she was central to a bold experiment in monotheism, in which the sun god Aten was elevated above all others. Nefertiti wasn't just a consort. Art from the time shows her engaging in pharaonic roles, including ceremonial smiting of enemies. Some Egyptologists suggest she may have even ruled independently for a brief time following Akhenaten's death. Her disappearance from historical records around the 12th to 14th year of Akhenaten's reign remains unexplained. No definitive burial site or mention of her death has ever been located. With the royal capital at Amarna during her final years, it's speculated she was to be buried there, though her tomb has never been found in the royal necropolis. Later, King Tutankhamun returned the court to Thebes and abandoned the Aten cult, erasing the memory of Akhenaten and his queen from official history. In 2015, a hypothesis gained traction suggesting Nefertiti's burial chamber might lie behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves pointed to anomalies in wall scans suggesting 2 sealed doorways. He proposed that the tomb was originally constructed for a queen, possibly Nefertiti, and repurposed for the young king. Subsequent radar scans delivered mixed results. Some teams claimed to detect voids. Others found nothing unusual. Then in 2020, new ground scans hinted at a large underground space just north of Tut's tomb, though excavation has not yet confirmed its purpose. Reeves added in 2022 that faint hieroglyphic traces beneath existing inscriptions might prove the tomb was initially prepared for Nefertiti. One theory posits that Nefertiti was buried at Amarna and later moved when the city was abandoned. Supporting evidence includes fragments of funerary items found in the area. However, no inscription confirms her identity. Others propose she may rest in the Valley of the Queens or another undiscovered site. 2 unidentified female mummies in tomb KV-21 have also been considered candidates. 1. KV-21A may be the mother of Tutankhamun's daughters, possibly his wife, Ankhesenamun. The other, KV-21B, could match Nefertiti in age and has been the subject of new DNA analysis. While no results have been publicly released, Zahi Hawass believes that advances in genetic testing could soon identify her remains. Yet even if her mummy is discovered, the the location of her original tomb may remain elusive. The mystery of Nefertiti's final resting place continues to captivate historians and archaeologists alike. Atlantis of the South. Beneath the turbulent waters of the southern Indian Ocean lies a submerged landform unlike almost any other on Earth. The Kerguelen Plateau, stretching across more than 500,000 square miles, larger than California, it remains hidden beneath the waves, hinting at a long-lost terrestrial past. Though it now lies buried under thousands of feet of ocean water, its history suggests it may once have stood proudly above the sea. This plateau wasn't always submerged. Its origins trace back to the early Cretaceous period, around 130 million years ago, when intense volcanic activity from a deep mantle hotspot laid the groundwork for a massive igneous province. Lava spread out in enormous flows, building the structure that would become the Kerguelen Plateau, alongside formations like the Broken Ridge and the Rajmahal Traps of India. Geological surveys have shown that these regions share a common volcanic origin. At various points in its early life, portions of the plateau were likely above sea level. Ancient rivers may have once carved through the highlands and vegetation, confirmed by fossilized plant remains, including conifers, thrived in these elevated areas. The presence of coal beds further supports the notion that this region supported life on land. These clues strongly suggest the Kerguelen Plateau wasn't just ocean floor. It was once dry, habitable terrain. Core samples taken from the seabed have revealed granitic rocks typically associated with continental crust rather than the basalt more common in oceanic crust. This has led scientists to propose that the Kerguelen Plateau may be a fragment of a lost continent, separated during the breakup of the supercontinent Gondwana. As the landmass split into what we now know as South America, Africa, India, Antarctica, and Australia, Kerguelen may have sheared off and slowly sank over tens of millions of years. Today, only a few isolated landforms, most notably the Kerguelen Islands and Heard Island, remain above the waves. These islands are the last visible pieces of what was once a much larger entity. Most of the plateau lies between 3,000 and 6,000 feet below the ocean surface, hidden in the cold darkness. However, the classification of the plateau as a continent remains controversial. True continental crust is typically thick, granitic, and buoyant, while much of Kerguelen is composed of basalt, dense volcanic rock more characteristic of oceanic regions. Moreover, to qualify as a continent, geologists usually expect a landmass to include distinct geological, ecological, and topographic characteristics. Despite these challenges, the idea that Kerguelen represents a microcontinent, a continental fragment that broke away and sank, remains compelling. It may not be Atlantis, but it represents one of the most tantalizing examples of how Earth's surface continues to evolve and shift over time, burying once thriving landscapes beneath the sea. The Atlantis of the North Sea. A trawler rises and falls on the gray swells of the North Sea. Its nets scrape the bottom, pulling up cod and bones, a mammoth tusk curved like a question mark, flint tools shaped by vanished hands, fragments of ancient peat with the scent of forest still locked inside. Beneath these waters lies a continent that once connected Britain to Europe. 10,000 years ago, Doggerland was a tapestry of meadows, rivers, and marsh. Reindeer moved along its valleys. Hunters followed, carrying spears of antler and stone. Families gathered berries in the summer heat, built shelters near the lakes, left footprints in soft silt that hardened and endured. It was a living world. Then the ice began to melt. The sea rose slowly at first, swallowing low ground season after season. Villages shifted to higher ridges, camps moved inland. But 8,000 years ago, a wall of water came from the north. A landslide off the coast of Norway collapsed into the sea, sending a tsunami racing across the shallow shelf. Forests snapped, rivers filled with salt, and the last hills of Doggerland became islands. Within centuries, even they were gone. Fishermen in the 19th century first hauled up its ghosts. axes, bones, antlers. Today, seismic scans from oil companies trace the beds of rivers beneath the seabed. Storms reveal black stumps of drowned oak forests. On Dutch beaches, mammoth teeth and worked flints emerge from the tide. Each artifact proves the land was real. Each discovery deepens the mystery. Was Doggerland only a land bridge, or did it hold its own culture, trade, and faith? No one knows. The sea keeps its map sealed. Beneath those cold waves lies a story erased by water, yet written in fragments too many to ignore, too few to fully tell. America's Viking Grail. In the late 19th century, a Swedish-American farmer named Olaf Oman stumbled upon a large stone while clearing trees on his land near Kensington, Minnesota. The object was unlike anything local settlers had seen before, a gray slab covered in runic inscriptions that, according to early translations, described a Norse expedition deep into North America in the year 1362. The idea was astonishing. If genuine, the Kensington runestone could prove that Scandinavian seafarers, centuries after their well-documented settlements in Greenland and Newfoundland, traveled hundreds of miles into the North American interior. It would predate Columbus's arrival by over a century, rewriting history as we know it. The text carved into the stone described a party of 30 Norsemen exploring the region by water. After losing several men to a mysterious attack, perhaps by local indigenous people or wild animals, the survivors supposedly left the inscription behind as a memorial. The runes referenced a date and gave a brief but harrowing account of their journey. Yet from the start, the stone was met with fierce skepticism. Linguists immediately noticed that the runic forms and vocabulary were inconsistent with what we'd expect from medieval Scandinavia. Some of the grammar and word choices more closely resembled 19th century Swedish dialects than the language of the 1300s. Geologists who examined the carving offered conflicting opinions. A few believed weathering patterns could indicate great age, while others saw signs of recent chisel marks, consistent with a relatively modern forgery. One glaring concern was that by the 14th century, Scandinavians had largely ceased the practice of carving runestones altogether. The tradition had faded by the 1200s. Complicating the picture further was the cultural climate of Scandinavian immigrant communities in 19th century Minnesota. Many settlers felt a strong connection to their ancestral homeland and may have been eager to establish a mythic Norse presence in America's past. The discovery of a Viking artifact could serve not only as a point of pride, but also as a source of attention, validation, and even tourism. Over the decades, scholars have debated the artifact endlessly. While a small number of enthusiasts defend its authenticity, the academic consensus is clear. The Kensington runestone is almost certainly a modern hoax. Its linguistic anachronisms, convenient discovery context, and lack of corroborating artifacts all point to a clever fabrication. Nonetheless, it remains a powerful cultural symbol, especially for Scandinavian Americans. It reflects the deep yearning to find one's place in history, even if that history must be imagined. The possibility of Norse expeditions beyond the coastal settlements remains intriguing, but until further evidence surfaces, the Kensington runestone stands not as proof, but as a compelling historical mystery. Did the Templars worship Baphomet? In 1307, King Philip IV of France, eager to cancel his debts and claim the wealth of the Knights Templar, launched a sweeping arrest of the order's members. With support from Pope Clement V, Templars were charged with blasphemy, heresy, and the alleged veneration of a mysterious idol named Baphomet. The name had appeared earlier during the Crusades, likely as a distorted version of Muhammad, due to the medieval European misunderstanding of Islam. Christians of the time often depicted Muslims as idolaters who worshipped Muhammad as a god. Over time, Baphomet came to symbolize a generic pagan or heretical deity in Christian discourse. During the Templar trials, accounts of Baphomet varied wildly. Some captives described a disembodied head, others spoke of a three-faced figure, and a few mentioned animals or human skulls. No physical idol was ever found. The term Baphomet did not appear in the original charges. Its emergence came during interrogations, suggesting that inquisitors may have introduced the idea. Out of 231 Templars questioned in Paris, only 12, fewer than 5%, confessed to knowing anything about Baphomet, and those confessions were extracted under duress. Most admitted to lesser accusations, like spitting on the cross, which suggests that the Baphomet charge was not widely accepted, even under torture. Many retracted their confessions once freed from their cells. Outside France, papal inquiries found little proof of heresy. In England and the Holy Roman Empire, most Templars were pardoned or lightly punished. Nevertheless, under pressure from Philip, French courts proceeded. The order's Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, eventually retracted his confession and was burned at the stake in 1314. Scholars today agree that the Baphomet accusation was fabricated, echoing older charges used against other perceived heretics like the Cathars. While there were rare cases of individual Templars converting to Islam, such as Robert of Street, Albans, who joined Saladin's forces, no credible evidence supports the idea of widespread Islamic sympathy, let alone idol worship. Despite the medieval smear, the legend of Baphomet was resurrected centuries later. In 1818, Orientalist Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall claimed the Templar worshipped Gnostic idols. Then in the mid-1800s, French occultist Eliphas Lévy reimagined Baphomet as a goat-headed hermaphrodite, embodying duality and cosmic balance. His illustration became iconic, though it had no historical link to the Templars. The image stuck. Though the Templars were officially absolved, the myth endures, a potent fusion of politics, torture, and occult fantasy that refuses to disappear. Rome's strangest relics. Across the old provinces of the Roman Empire, strange bronze objects surface from fields, rivers, and graves. 12 faces, each face a pentagon with a hole at its center. Knobs at every corner, some small as apples, others the size of a fist. They are called Roman dodecahedrons. Over 100 have been found, scattered from Britain to Hungary, from Germany to France, yet never in Rome itself. No ancient writer mentions them. No inscription explains them. The empire recorded taxes, engineering manuals, even graffiti insults on tavern walls. About these objects, nothing. Theories multiply. Measuring devices for distance or sunlight. Tools for casting metal spheres. Frames for knitting gloves. Survey instruments for battlefield angles. The lack of standard sizes argues against pure engineering. The holes differ from one object to another. No two are quite the same. Another theory sees them as ritual objects, perhaps linked to the Celts living on the empire's northern frontiers. Candles inside would cast patterns of light. Alignments with solstices or sacred landscapes might explain their distribution far from Rome's center. Many were found among treasure hoards, suggesting value beyond the ordinary. Yet their purpose remains elusive. Hold one in your hand, and it feels deliberate, balanced, intricate, made for eyes and fingers, too carefully crafted to be meaningless, too silent across the centuries to give up its secret. The Roman world mastered concrete, roads, aqueducts, and war machines, but it also left behind this unanswered question in bronze, as if to remind us that even empires write some sentences in cipher. Medieval legend tells of a monk named Herman the Recluse, condemned to be walled up alive for breaking his vows. Facing death and darkness, he struck a desperate bargain. He would create in a single night a book so magnificent it would bring eternal glory to the monastery, a compendium of all human knowledge. As the hours slipped away and the enormity of the task crushed him, he turned not to God, but to the devil. For the price of his soul, the work was finished by dawn. Bible, histories, medical treatises, calendars, and incantations. To seal the pact, the devil left his likeness within, filling an entire page with a vivid, solitary portrait. The giant volume became known as the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. Nearly a meter tall and weighing more than 70 kilograms, it was the largest manuscript of its age. Its pages held the complete Latin Vulgate Bible, alongside the histories of Flavius Josephus, the Ars Medicinae Medical Compendium, Cosmas of Prague's Chronicle of Bohemia, and a collection of monastic rituals and protective charms. In essence, it was a library bound into a single book. Its origin lies in early 13th century Bohemia, between 1200 and 1230. The earliest record places it in the Benedictine monastery of Podlasis, a modest and impoverished house ill-suited to producing such a lavish work. Yet there it was treasured, passed from monastery to monastery as its fame spread. In 1295, it moved briefly to the Cistercians of Sedlec before returning to Benedictine hands in Prague. By the late 16th century, it caught the eye of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, a collector of rare wonders and occult objects. He brought it to his Prague castle in 1594, where it remained until the end of the 30 Years' War. In 1648, Swedish troops seized it as plunder and carried it to Stockholm, where it entered the Royal Library. Its survival was nearly cut short in 1697, when fire swept through Stockholm's Tre Kronor Castle. In the chaos, someone hurled the Devil's Bible from a window to save it, the massive book crashing to the ground, and by some accounts, injuring a bystander. In 1878, it was placed in the National Library of Sweden, where it remains today. Modern analysis confirms the myth's core impossibility. The manuscript was indeed written by a single scribe, but over decades, not hours. Handwriting consistency across its hundreds of pages suggests 20 to 30 years of work by one steady hand. The name Herman the Recluse does appear in the text, though whether it was the scribe's name, a pseudonym, or a dedication remains uncertain. Another mystery lies in its missing pages. Originally composed of 320 sheets, 12 are gone. One contained the opening of Genesis. The contents of the others are unknown, inviting speculation about lost or forbidden material. The Codex Gigas remains unique not only for its size and scope, but for the unsettling image of the devil dominating an entire page, a feature found in no other Bible of the era. 8 centuries later, it still sits at the intersection of fact and fable, a work of devotion and a monument to the legend that gave it its name. The Forgotten King. Among the pantheon of Viking legends, Ragnar Lothbrok stands out as the archetype of the Norse warrior, fierce in battle, clever in strategy, and destined for a heroic end. But was Ragnar a historical figure, or is he the product of centuries of storytelling? He is most famously known as the father of Viking icons, such as Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. Medieval sagas portray him as a king of Sweden or Denmark, descended from noble blood, whose sons waged war across England and the Frankish kingdoms. But most of these sources, like the tale of Ragnar's sons or Saxo Grammaticus's Gesta Danorum, were written 300 to 400 years after Ragnar's supposed lifetime. One of the most gripping tales tells of his capture by King Ella of Northumbria and execution by Snake Pit. According to legend, Ragnar was thrown into a pit filled with venomous serpents, but met his end with stoic defiance, singing of revenge and glory. His sons would later avenge him by leading the great heathen army into England in 865. Historical records do confirm the existence of a major Viking invasion at that time, and it was indeed led by figures with names matching those in the sagas. But this isn't definitive proof of Ragnar's life, only that someone by that name, or reputation, inspired real military action. Another frequently cited event attributed to Ragnar is the 845 raid on Paris. Frankish annals describe a Viking leader named Reginheris, who extorted a huge ransom from the city and withdrew. Some believe this was Ragnar under a Latinized name, but the connection remains uncertain. Modern historians suggest that Ragnar may be a composite character, created by merging the exploits of several historical Viking leaders. Oral traditions tend to consolidate complex histories into singular figures, turning multiple warlords into one legendary hero. The sparse and poetic nature of runestones, combined with the scarcity of contemporary Viking written texts, makes it nearly impossible to trace his origin definitively. Despite the murkiness of his story, Ragnar persists as a central figure in Viking mythology. He represents the bravery, cunning, and ambition that defined the Norse era. Whether he truly lived or was forged from the fires of collective memory, his legend has endured for over 1,000 years. Knight with the Iron Hand. At the Siege of Landshut in 1504, the air was thick with smoke and the roar of cannon fire. Amid the chaos, a shot tore through the din and found its mark, slamming into the right wrist of a young Franconian knight. Steel shattered bone. His sword fell to the ground. Blood soaked into the churned earth. For most warriors of the age, it would have been the end. For Gotz von Berlichingen, it was a pause. Within months, he returned to the saddle, his severed hand replaced by a gauntlet of iron, its hinged fingers shaped by a blacksmith's hammer, locked in place by hidden springs. His resilience was forged in a land where survival meant constant readiness for war. Born into a minor noble family in Franconia, Gotz grew up in the shadow of crumbling castles and shifting alliances. From an early age, he learned that power came not from title alone, but from the ability to defend it. As a teenager, he served in the retinues of great lords, riding under Margrave Frederick of Brandenburg and Spach in 1497, and campaigning for Emperor Maximilian I the following year. By 1500, he had traded the security of formal service for the freedom and danger of independence. He gathered a company of seasoned fighters, their loyalty bound by gold and honor, and began hiring out their swords to dukes, barons, and princes. The Holy Roman Empire was a patchwork of rival powers, and Gotz thrived in the spaces where law blurred into personal justice. His feuds were as bold as they were costly. In 1512, he ambushed a caravan of wealthy Nuremberg merchants on the open road, seizing their goods and humiliating one of the richest cities in the empire. The act drew the personal ire of Maximilian, who branded him an outlaw until a crippling fine was paid. 4 years later, his quarrel with the Archbishop of Mainz escalated into open hostility. Gotz captured a nobleman allied to the Archbishop, holding him for ransom, a lucrative move that earned him another outlaw sentence, lifted only in 1518. But Gotz's ambitions stretched beyond local vendettas. In 1519, he threw his lot in with Duke Ulrich of Württemberg in a war against the Swabian League, a powerful coalition of princes and cities. Given command of Machmel Fortress, Gotz held out against siege until food and ammunition were gone. Promised safe passage upon surrender, he was instead taken prisoner and delivered into enemy hands. He bought his freedom in 1522 with ransom money and a sworn oath never to seek revenge. 3 years later, the German Peasants' War swept through the countryside. Tens of thousands of armed commoners rose against their lords, demanding an end to feudal burdens. In the Odenwald, the rebels turned to Gotz, pressing him to lead them. He accepted reluctantly, hoping to impose discipline and curb the violence, but found their rage uncontrollable. After a month, he abandoned the role and returned to his castle. His brief leadership and his history of standing against the powerful cemented his reputation among the peasantry as a champion of the common man. The price of his defiance was steep. Though acquitted at the Diet of Speyer in 1526, the Swabian League exacted revenge in 1528, luring him to Augsburg under false pretenses and imprisoning him for 2 years. Yet even as age crept in, the empire still called upon him. In 1542, Charles V summoned him to fight the Ottoman Turks in Hungary. 2 years later, he rode into France during the emperor's campaigns there. Only after these final battles did Gotz, now 64, retire to his estate. Through all these wars, the Iron Hand was both a weapon and a symbol. The first, built soon after Landshut, was simple: 4 hooked fingers to hold a shield, crude yet functional. The second, crafted in the 1520s, was a marvel of its time. Extending to his forearm and secured with leather straps, it featured articulated fingers and thumb, each joint able to lock into place. Springs, ratchets, and hinges gave it a range of motion that allowed him to grip reins, hold tankards, and rest it on the pommel of his sword. Crafted by the same master armorers who could forge articulated plate armor and build intricate clockwork, it was a triumph of Renaissance engineering. Guts often said his iron hand had served me better in the fight than the original flesh. Whether boast or truth, it was part of the legend he cultivated, the knight who could not be disarmed. Both of his prosthetic hands still rest today in Jagstausen Castle, silent relics of a man whose life was a long defiance of fate, authority, and the limits of the body. Trial of the Beast. The first recorded werewolf witch trials did not begin quietly. They erupted out of fear, rumor, and blood. In 15th century Europe, whispers of human predators wearing the skin of wolves spread through villages already haunted by famine, disease, and war. These were no ordinary wolves, the stories claimed, but men and women who had bargained with the devil, trading their souls for the power to hunt in the dark. In 1428, in the Alpine valleys of Valais, such whispers became accusations, and accusations became death sentences. Officials claimed certain villagers could call down storms, blight crops, and slip into the shape of a wolf to tear apart their neighbors. Hundreds were condemned, many burned, their possessions seized by local lords. The pattern was clear: those without family or protection, those whose deaths left land to be claimed, were most likely to be named as wolf witches. From these mountains, the fear spread. By the 16th and 17th centuries, trials accusing people of both witchcraft and lycanthropy reached their height. In the courts, there was no real distinction. A werewolf was simply a witch in another form. Demonology handbooks placed them alongside witches and spirits, and inquisitors treated their confessions the same way. Judges like Henry Boguet in France wrote of defendants snarling and crouching like beasts in the dock, taking this as proof of satanic transformation. The stories told under interrogation rarely differed. The accused spoke of meeting a shadowed stranger, always in black, who offered a salve, a potion, or a wolf's pelt. With it came the ability to run on 4 legs, attend midnight gatherings, and hunt as a predator. Whether these tales were born of belief, coercion, or both, they became the official record. The climate that fed these trials was one of chaos. Wolves roamed the countryside, sometimes attacking livestock or lone travelers. When bodies were found mutilated, the leap from wolf to werewolf was a small one. Religious leaders, both Catholic and Protestant, used such fears to stamp out what they saw as lingering pagan customs, especially in remote or recently Christianized regions. Mass panic could take hold in days. A strange howl in the forest, a neighbor's unexplained absence, or the disappearance of animals might be enough to set an entire village whispering. Soon, pamphlets and sermons painted werewolves as ever-present threats, prowling just beyond the firelight. Some cases still stand out for their brutality. In 1521, Burgundy, 2 shepherds, Pierre Bergot and Michael Verdun, confessed to receiving an ointment from a man in black and using it to hunt as wolves. They admitted to killing both strangers and neighbors. Both were burned alive, along with an alleged accomplice. In 1589, Bedburg, Germany, Peter Stump's trial became infamous. Accused of a quarter-century of murders, he confessed under torture to owning a magic belt from the devil that let him take wolf form. His execution was staged to shock. Broken on the wheel, beheaded, and his head mounted on a pike for all to see. In Livonia, in 1692, the werewolf panic took a strange turn. Theus of Kaltenbrunn, an 80-year-old peasant, freely admitted to being a werewolf, but claimed he was a hound of God, fighting demons in hell to protect his people's harvests. His defiance spared him execution. He was whipped and banished instead. By the end of the 17th century, the madness began to fade. The Enlightenment's rationalism spread, and the idea that Satan could literally turn humans into wolves lost its grip on the courts. What had once been treated as proof of sorcery came to be seen as illness, superstition, or the product of torture. Though far less common than standard witch trials, the werewolf prosecutions left behind a legacy of fear, folklore, and confessions that straddled the line between myth and history, a reminder of the power a story can hold when the world is ready to believe it. In the summer of 1764, the remote hills of Gévaudan in southern France became the scene of a relentless hunt. The first known victim, 14-year-old Jean Boulet, was found savaged beyond recognition in late June. Her death marked the beginning of a terror that would grip the region for 3 years. By its end in 1767, more than 100 people had been attacked, most with fatal results. Soon after Boulet's killing, reports spread of a monstrous, wolf-like predator emerging from the forests. It struck at farmers in their fields and shepherds tending their flocks, preying especially on women and children in the open pastures. Survivors spoke of an animal with coarse reddish fur, a dark streak along its back, and a size far beyond any normal wolf. Many bodies were discovered with throats ripped open or worse, grisly evidence that suggested the creature was no ordinary beast. Panic took hold. Parents kept children indoors, and workers carried weapons to the fields. The local authorities organized hunts, but the predator seemed to vanish as easily as it appeared. In January 1765, a group of children led by a boy named Jacques Portefaix fought off the creature by standing together. Their courage earned the attention of King Louis XV, who dispatched royal hunters to end the bloodshed. A veteran wolf hunting team arrived first, scouring the countryside without success. They were soon replaced by the king's huntmaster, François Antoine. In September 1765, Antoine killed a massive wolf thought to be the culprit. Its carcass was sent to Versailles, and the hunter was celebrated as a hero. For a moment, the attacks ceased, only to return within months. From December 1765 through 1766, new victims fell in the same brutal fashion. Whether the original predator had survived or another had taken its place, the result was the same. The royal court, convinced the threat was gone, offered no further help. The task fell back to local leadership. The Marquis capturer organized determined hunts with his villagers, culminating in June 1767, when hunter Jean Chastel brought down a large wolf-like animal. After his shot, the killings stopped. Some accounts claimed the body was open to reveal human remains inside, grim confirmation that the right creature had been slain. In total, the death toll may have reached 100, making the so-called Beast of Gévaudan one of the most lethal predators recorded in European history. Yet its identity remains uncertain. Many believed it was no ordinary wolf, but something more sinister. Witness descriptions conflicted. Some insisted it looked like an enormous wolf. Others spoke of features unlike any animal they knew. This ambiguity fueled theories that persist to this day. The most accepted explanation points to wolves. Though rare, wolf attacks on humans did occur in 18th century France, and Gévaudan was surrounded by wolf-dense wilderness. The method of attack: throats torn out, fits known wolf behavior. Several unusually large wolves were killed during the hunts, leading some to think the beast was actually more than one animal. Another variation suggests a wolf-dog hybrid bred for size and aggression. Other theories reach further afield. Some propose an escaped exotic animal, perhaps a young lion or a striped hyena. A lion without a full mane could match reports of a tawny coat, tufted tail, and immense strength. A hyena's build and striped back would fit many. Eyewitness accounts: wealthy individuals and traveling circuses did keep such animals at the time, and an escape is conceivable, though no records of one exist. More speculative ideas venture into human or supernatural territory. One tale claimed a man trained a large mastiff to attack, possibly armored to look monstrous. Others swore the predator was a cursed creature, a werewolf, or something demonic. None of these notions were ever proven. What roamed the hills of Givaudan between 1764 and 1767 remains a mystery. Whether an unusually aggressive wolf, a hybrid, an exotic escapee, or something beyond explanation, the beast left behind a legacy of fear and an enigma that history has never solved. Desert ghosts. In the heart of Death Valley lies Racetrack Playa, a dry lakebed flat as a blade. Scattered across it are stones that move. Tracks stretch for hundreds of meters across the cracked mud. Some run straight. Others curve, wander, or reverse direction sharply. Yet no one has ever seen the stones in motion. They sit at the end of their own trails as if they stopped the moment someone looked their way. For decades, theories fought for attention. Hurricane winds, magnetic forces, pranksters with trucks. None quite fit the evidence. The mystery endured until 2013, when researchers placed GPS devices on the rocks and set cameras to watch through winter. That winter, the secret revealed itself. Rain flooded the playa in a shallow sheet. Night froze the water into a thin skin of ice. Morning sun cracked the surface into floating panels. Wind pushed the drifting ice against the stones, sliding them slowly over the slick mud beneath. No one had imagined such a delicate mechanism. Ice only millimeters thick, moving rocks weighing hundreds of kilograms. Some traveled hundreds of meters in a single season. When the water dried and the ice vanished, the tracks remained like signatures across the barren floor. Yet even now, questions linger. Why do some stones move while others nearby stay still for years? Why do tracks sometimes curve as if guided by intent rather than wind and ice alone? The playa keeps part of its secret even after giving up the rest. In the silence of Death Valley, motion writes its story without witnesses, leaving only the traces of its passing under the desert sun. Crimean Goths. The Crimean Goths were remnants of a Gothic group that established themselves in the Crimean Peninsula from the 3rd century onward. While their western cousins formed powerful kingdoms, the Crimean branch remained in relative seclusion. Initially displacing or integrating with local populations, the Goths carved out territory among Greeks and Scythians. They became part of the Ostrogothic realm under King Hermaneric until the Huns dismantled it in the late 4th century. Survivors retreated into the mountainous south of Crimea, forming an isolated community. This region, later known as Gothia, became a bastion of their culture. Archaeological finds support their enduring presence. Their remote location shielded them from major upheavals, aiding their survival. Christianized early by the missionary Wulfila, the Goths later entered into a loose relationship with the Eastern Roman Empire. Though far from Constantinople, they traded and shared religious ties. In the early medieval era, they faced new powers, including the Khazars, under whom they likely paid tribute while maintaining autonomy. By the 14th century, they formed the Principality of Theodoro, a multicultural state with Gothic roots. The principality was strongly influenced by Byzantine culture and maintained ties to Greek states like Trebizond. Despite being surrounded by rival forces, Theodoro held out through strategic alliances and its defensible terrain. That ended in 1475 when the Ottoman Empire, fresh from its conquest of Constantinople, overran the region. After the fall of Mangup Fortress, the last Gothic stronghold fell. Even after their state disappeared, the people did not vanish overnight. Gothic communities persisted into the 16th century. European travelers reported encountering people who spoke a Germanic tongue. One such report came from diplomat Ogier Gisselin de Busbecq in the 1550s. Other accounts surfaced of locals with Germanic traits or language. However, by the late 18th century, these mentions ceased. The last credible report dates to around 1780, noting a distinct group with unfamiliar customs and speech. Over time, the Crimean Goths assimilated into surrounding populations, Tatars, Greeks, and others. Observers even noted fair features in remote communities, possibly hinting at Gothic ancestry. Thus, A people who had maintained identity for over a millennium eventually faded into the cultural mosaic of Crimea.